Hello and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. Sitting here in Calgary, Alberta, and it's freezing cold, minus 27, and we had a major snowstorm yesterday. Howling winds, blowing snow, dug ourselves out. It's still cold though. Anyway, getting back to karate, got some invites to some competitions. Like we run competitions through the year, one in our northern dojos and one in our Calgary dojos. We run under JKA rules, well, modified JKA rules, because we invite all styles, and so you can't really eliminate through the katas, the heian katas and second round katas for all styles if they're not familiar with your kata style. So you can't ask people do heian yondan or heian sandan in competition if they have no idea what it's for. So we usually just go on the scoring side. So it's modified JKA rules. When I say JKA, I mean all JKA, shobu ippon, touch to score. You have to touch if you want to score. And everybody should be capable of this. We do make exceptions with the lower grades and the younger competitors, of course. But generally, touching is allowed. Now, this might come as a shock, and it does come as a shock to some competitors who never touch each other, do karate at a distance, sort of online, if you like. I don't know how you can do kumite online, but some of them do. So I was looking at the main differences between the way we conduct a competition and the way the sports people, WKF, I think, conduct their competitions. And they've tried modifying their rules. In fact, they seem to modify them every week, the WKF do. And it seems like they're trying to get more in line with the old traditional shobu ippon rules. Even in the katas, they're now starting to say, extravagant movements and starched gis and slapping your gi and all this stuff is going to be penalized, but I haven't seen it yet. And the other thing that I noticed in the sports side is they'll do Shotokan katas, but they'll modify them in some way. And I'm not talking about onsu because that's an absolute bloody mess when it comes to sport karate. They'll modify it any way they want just to make it look good and flashy. I'm talking about like the use of kicks. For example, on Gankaku, now everybody is a Shotokan practitioner of a decent rank. You'll understand what I'm saying about Gankaku. Gankaku is a crane on a rock kata, and side snap kicks are used. Now, I'm not a big fan of side snap kicks because you will not see a side snap kick used in competition. I've never seen it used, and I've seen some of the best competitors in the world for years and years. I've never seen any of them use a side snap kick in a competition. I've seen a lot of street fights. Nobody's ever used a side snap kick. Been in a lot of street fights, never used a side snap kick. So why do we use it? Well, it certainly wasn't used in the original Pinan versions of the katas. So the first time we come across this kick, Yoko Geri Keage, is in Heian Nidan, okay? Or in Pinan Shodan, if you like. But they don't use a Keage, they use a Maigeri. It seems a lot more practical to me. But the use of Keage was always in Shotokan karate from when I first started. And so I just did what I was told and worked on Keage. And it's quite a hard kick to get right. If you want to learn this technique, you have to understand about pendulum action in your kicks. Now, pendulum action, if you imagine your body, your head held still, and your hips go forward and back. Now, they don't go all the way back. They go forward, and then as you retract them with your foot, they come back. So you're back into an upright posture, keeping your support leg slightly bent for your balance and your weight dropped down. So this is a pendulum action. Use it in Maigeri, okay? Now, in Keage, you pendulum your hips to the side and back, okay? The big problem I have when I'm teaching this is getting people not to start leaning away. It's the same with Yoko Geri Kekomi, side thrust. They lift the knee up, and immediately when the knee's in the raised position, the chamber position, if you like, they're already leaning their upper body away from the kick. If you lean your upper body away from it, as soon as you make contact with something, you're going to go the way that your body's leaning, and your opponent's going to be standing there looking at you, ready to kick you. So you have to kind of lean into your kick. So your weight should always be on the kicking side of your support leg, no matter what kick you're doing, okay? So Keage, because of the line of the kick, which should be 90 degrees from your hip, it's kind of hard to teach. And then I spotted one of my senior instructors, and he came up with what I think is a brilliant method for teaching this kick. He had the person standing facing the wall, putting the big toe on the wall, then raising the knee, keeping the toe in contact with the wall, extending the kick all the way back and back down again. It worked. The kick went in an absolute straight line, keeping the toe in contact with the wall. The other part of the foot, the blade turned down, it's just a part of the ankle extension, and a lot of people don't have really flexible ankles, but you want to use the side of the foot, the sakuto, the blade of the foot, and try to keep your toes turned back towards you as well. But if you keep your toe against the wall, other toes push down, and then extend through the line of the kick, it just works. And then once you've got that and you figure out, which messages to send to each muscle to achieve this track, if you like, the correct track of the technique, then it's a lot easier. I know I used to stand in line for hours holding onto a partner's arm and slapping my kick to the underside of his arm or his gi. We weren't allowed to kick him in the arm. And this is the way we learned Keage. But this was a much simpler, more effective and direct way. This is like an evolution of teaching, if you like, as well as the evolution of karate. But getting back to the sports karate, what I noticed with the Gankaku is they took the Keage out. And what they're doing now is a Jodan kekomi, and it's as high as possible. Now, when I learned Gankaku originally, we only ever aimed the kick to Chudan, along with the Urauchi to Jodan, or the back fist strike to Jodan at the same time, and then you moved into your punch. Okay, and punch follows the Keage and the Urauchi in Gankaku every time. And sometimes you step forward oisuki, right, for your ki-eyes, front and rear, beginning and end. But the kekomi just doesn't flow with the kata at all. And trying to find original versions of this kata with these kicks in was kind of hard, because it's probably not got a Keage in it. If you do find it, it's got a maigeri in it, which seems a lot more practical. But bringing the leg back to the chamber position to achieve the one-legged stance, a little bit awkward. Anyway, so that's sports and traditional, and the way we do our katas. The other thing I was trying to get across, hip pendulum. When you're doing your hip pendulum, like this is one of the power sources. Now, years ago, I trained extensively with Nishiyama Sensei down in LA. Went to all of his camps. Must have done 5 or 6 instructor courses with him. And he always maintained that the power sources must be taught. And we have rotation, counter-rotation, vibration, lifting, dropping, and pendulum. Now, I can't remember him ever talking about pendulum, but I do believe it's in one of the instructor's books that I got from him with the pendulum action. But rotation and counter-rotation are used extensively in lots of techniques. So when we're looking at rotation, we rotate from the back hip forward in a vector towards your target, right? Whether you're using a fist or a kick. It could be a mawashi, but you're rotating your whole body into it. Could be a block, like in agiyuki or soto ryuki, outside block. Okay, and then counter-rotation is when you're using something like gidambarai, where your hip is moving away from the vector of the block, and also the same in uchi-ryuki, inside block. Your hip is moving away from the vector of the technique. Okay, and of course you're making kime. And when you look at mawashi, of course we have ura-mawashi, or hook kick as some people call it, where you are using, well, if you do it properly and you want to put some power into it, it's generally a counter-rotation movement. And this enables you to get your foot back and recover it pretty quickly. You can use it as a rotation movement, but then it's hard to control your follow-through. Okay? And then when you're looking at Ushiro, both hips pendulum backwards, or they should both pendulum backwards. And you can use Ushiro or back kick either as a snapping action or a thrusting action. It's up to you. Okay? So when you're looking at pendulum, there's lots of different applications, but they're nearly all to do with kicking and rotation and counter-rotation. Also, to do with kicking as far as mawashi is concerned, but mostly to do with blocking and striking techniques. Where you get vibration is in close quarters, where you get like a double snap of the hip, and also in uchi, where you're using a fast snapping action of back fist. So it brings you to the term muchimi. And muchimi means like sticky rice cake. It comes from the Okinawan term sticky rice cakes that they have at times. And muchimi kind of anchor to the floor, keep it in contact with your opponent. And you can use muchimi either for a fast action, like a uchi, or you can use it for slow action, like you do in Hangatsu kata, where you're putting power all the way through. But you're in contact with the floor all the way through. I mean, when you look at everything, any technique, you always have to be in contact with the floor. You can jump up in the air and do a back fist, of course, but you need that plyometric push from the floor to start with. Okay, that's the one constant that you have. You need the leverage from the floor. And the most power is derived when you're in full contact with the floor through to your opponent. So this is muchimi is a little funny thing, but you can look it up. There's lots of definitions of it. You can Google it. I believe Jesse Ankamp might have mentioned something about it, but my understanding is you kind of whip into your opponent, or you can use it like a sticking action where you get close to your opponent, power in and like power through him, you know, like a full-blooded gyakuzuki with no snapback, just powering through. I had to use it in Kwazushi, like fire the punch from a back stance but finish in a front stance. We call it kurozuki, and I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but that's what I've always called it. And I remember Sensei Hanratty was teaching us at Crystal Palace many, many years ago, and he called it kurozuki. There's a famous little video clip of him doing this kurozuki, and he fires through and does a double back leg sweep with the same technique. Just brilliant. But I think he already had the guy frightened to death before he completed the movement anyway. That's just the way he was. So kurozuki is kind of, to me, defines muchimi, because you kind of go right through the guy rather than having a sticking action. It's through and in. Okay? So when you're looking at any technique, okay, and I said I'm not a big fan of keage because it's not a practical kick as far as I'm concerned. Kekomi is. I've seen kekomi used a lot. And I've always twisted on my support leg when I've been making kekomi. Is, you know, using the glutes. So I lift my knee, kind of swing it a little bit to the inside of my center line, and that helps me turn my hip over and push the kick out. And how high you get your hip always going to define how high you get your kick, right? This is the way I've always taught kekomi. And I went to Hungary teaching a seminar with some AJKA people, originally ISKF. This guy was originally ISKF. And he was trying to say that kekomi should be delivered with the foot pointed forward. So if you're facing forward and you want to deliver your side kick, you don't twist on your support leg at all, which didn't seem exactly right to me, but this is what the guy insisted, and it just didn't make sense, and it didn't put any power into the kick. It was more like a snapping kick. It was kind of a cross between a keage and a kekomi. It just pointed it, pushed it out, pushed your hip a little bit towards the opponent, and then snapped it back without rotating your foot. Now, I've seen people do really fast kekomis. Shane Dorfman, brilliant at it, snap his foot out and back, and you know it wasn't a snap kick, it was a thrust kick. But the shortness of the kime was key. How you can shorten your kime, to me, is the essence of real karate mastery. Making full contact, full kime, everything into it, and then immediately back ready for the next technique, or follow on. So each technique has to follow on. And so the retraction is just as important as the extension of any technique. So with a snap technique, it's snapping back the hips as well as the foot that makes you ready for your next technique. So when I'm teaching like mawashi or mawashi, even ushiro, I always insist that my students bring their foot back into the chamber position as though they were going to deliver a maigeri immediately following. This makes sure that you get your foot all the way back, but it also makes you ready for another technique. You don't have to make a maigeri. You can drive down and throw a punch in or whatever you want to do, or even touch down and sweep whatever you want, but always get your hips back. I know you see a lot of MMA fighters now, when they throw a mawashi, they'll spin right around with it. There's no control on it. Same thing with a sweep. They'll sweep right through the leg and spin round. And the other person doesn't seem to react, right? And I think to myself, if that was somebody like George Brett or Frank Brennan, they'll swing themselves all the way around and, say hello to a knuckle or a foot. But it doesn't seem to work like that. But that's not retracting your kick, and that's not getting your body ready for a further technique. Okay? The idea of making your technique full power, then coming back to ready position, whether you've delivered an attacking technique or not, coming back to ready position is so that you don't leave yourself open or hollow or kyo, as Nishiyama used to describe it. Being kyo was when you were off, and this is when you would get hit. Okay? And that's what you're always looking for in an opponent. This is why psychological intent is just as important as technique, right? Your psychological intent has to be there. You have to psychologically be in the moment to deliver your technique. You can't be thinking, if I hit him too hard, I'll get sued. That doesn't work, okay? If you're thinking you'll get sued, you shouldn't be there. You should run away, because that's not what it's about. And remember, action always beats reaction. This is an important thing to remember. It's all right staying in the dojo and you're facing your partner and you go Jodan or Chudan or Maigari or whatever, and then you attack and he blocks and counters. The main reason he's blocking and countering is that you just told him what you were going to do. What you need to do is figure out how to make that kind of situation where you can react as fast as his action, which is very, very hard, because predicting somebody's actions and then reacting to them, you're already too late. So sometimes, like one of the things I'm going to tell my students is, if you've blocked, you're probably too late. If you have to block, you're probably too late. He's already got the intention out there and committed himself to it. And he's not just going to stop with one punch that you can block, okay? There's going to be all sorts of stuff coming at the same time. Kicks, punches, headbutts, throws, crashing into you, body smashes. All this is going to come. And you can't just stand there and make one block and expect that your counter punch to stop him dead. It's not going to work, okay? You have to try to pick up the intention a lot earlier and make the action rather than react. But anyway, getting back to my first point, I started talking about Keage. I say, not a big fan of it, but it's in the kata. What does it do? Well, it trains your body. It gives you flexibility, gives you muscle control and a good range of motion. And it's kind of like a slapping kick, except you're supposed to use the side of your foot. But we've practiced it against somebody holding the hand in a horizontal position and then side kicking up into the palm of the hand, or you could use a fist pad as well. And this way it'll get you used to hitting a target with it, and you can see what you can do. But I've never seen it used in any kind of confrontation apart from kata, which is an imaginary confrontation, if you like. Anyway, just my views on side snap kick. I'm not sure who introduced it, probably Gigo Funakoshi. He introduced most high kicks, and about that time the katas were changing from Pinan to Heian, so who knows who put it in there. But it's been in there for a long time with the JKA. I learnt it. Probably thousands of people have learnt it. I'd be interested to know if any of you have ever used it, in what context. So that's it from me, from freezing Alberta. Hopefully it'll get warm in a little while and we can get spring on the way so I can get out to my golf clubs. Okay, take care.